Okay, I am going to review Chapter 10, and we're going to start with our graphing review. Now, I know some of us felt a lot of anxiety about graphing, but we're just real quick going to remind you of what a quadratic equation's graph looks like. Hopefully you remember that the graph is called a parabola. And we're going to just talk about how to graph the parent function, which is y is equal to x squared. Okay, so if we were to make an XY chart, remember we pick our values for x and then we just plug them in for y if you don't remember this. And then we just plug them in. So negative 2 squared would be 4, negative 1 squared is 1, 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, and 2 squared is 4. Then we can go ahead and we can make ourselves a sketch. And we can just plot our ordered pairs. And then we can connect. And remember, our U-shaped graph is called our parabola. Remember, our minimum or our maximum is called our vertex. That's always a minimum or a maximum, the lowest or the highest point. And that vertex, remember, labels or splits our graph into two equal parts. And so we call that line the axis of symmetry. And really that's all that we're going to expect you to remember. We'll want you to identify what happens when we change the graph, and we'll talk more about that in class on Monday, is when that graph is going to shift and how it's going to shift based on the equation. The next thing we talked about in Chapter 10 was solving quadratic equations by extracting the square root. So what we're going to do, the idea is to isolate what is being squared. And there's a couple of things that we're going to encounter that are going to be a good reminder to us. So when we look at number 1, 4x squared is equal to 144, we need to get x squared by itself. So we're going to divide both sides by 4, and we're left with x squared is equal to 36. So it's asking the question, what number that times itself gives us a positive 36? So we square root both sides, and remember we get our two solutions, positive and negative 6. Now the good thing about our final is it's a multiple choice test, so if you forget this, hopefully you'll see those two answers as an option for the multiple choices, and that'll hopefully trigger that thing that helps you to remember that you're going to need two answers, okay? So for number 2, we need to get w squared by itself, so we're going to approach this just like a regular two-step equation until we get to the last step. So we add 51 to both sides. We have 6w squared is equal to 36. Of course, we watch our positive and negatives, divide both sides by 6, and we're left with w squared is equal to 6. We'll take the square root of both sides, and we will get that w is equal to positive or negative 2.45. Onward. Okay, number 3, I specifically remember on our test we had a whole bunch of people miss this question. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to isolate what is being squared, you can see. So this quantity right here is what we're trying to isolate. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and move everything away from that box. So first we're going to subtract 10 from both sides. Oh my, we're left with 5 times the quantity, 3x minus 1 squared is equal to 245. Now we need to get the 5 to the other side. We divide both sides by 5. And we're left with the quantity 3x minus 1 squared is equal to 49. Now from here, what we need to do is, this is when we need to take the square root and then write our two equations. So I'll go ahead, I take the square root of both sides. Now I'm going to write two equations. So I will have 3x minus 1 is equal to 7, or 3x minus 1 is equal to negative 7. Then I'll just solve these two-step equations. 3x is equal to 8, so x is equal to 8 thirds. Over here, 3x is equal to negative 6. So our other solution is x is equal to negative 2. So here are our two solutions. And again, if you forget about the two solutions, hopefully when you're reading the multiple choices, you'll look at your options and remember that you need to have two answers for these. Okay, number 4, we're going to divide both sides by 5. And you might already be noticing what's going on here, but when we have x squared is equal to a negative 25, hopefully by now you're thinking, I can't square something and get a negative number. That's not possible. Let's say you still haven't remembered that. Try and take the square root and you can't, for whatever reason, you type that into your calculator, even though I know you already know it, you're going to get that error. And we remember, oh yeah, we can't take the square root of a negative number, so this means there is going to be no solution. Okay, so we can either write it out or we can shortcut with our fancy symbol. All right, the next method we learned was completing the square. Some students really like this while others don't. And remember, to complete the square, we have to be in the form ax squared plus bx is equal to c. We need a to be equal to 1. And then to complete the square here, we add b over 2 squared to both sides. Okay? And we're actually only going to go ahead and do number 5. So for number 5, we have it in the correct form. So we need to figure out what's going to make x squared minus 10x plus what number a perfect trinomial, because we want it to factor to be something here. Okay, so what we're going to do is negative 10 divided by 2 squared. Order of operations, that's negative 5 squared, which is 25. So that means the number that we complete the square with is the number 25. So we're going to go ahead and we have x squared minus 10x. We're going to add 25 to this side equals 39, and then we're going to add 25 to this side. All right? So this means when we go to factor x squared minus 10x plus 25, that factors to x minus 5 quantity squared. Now, if you're not sure how to get that really quickly, you should be able to say, okay, that's a perfect square trinomial. But remember, our shortcut is this number right here, negative 5, is always that number in the factor. And then we can go ahead and go from there. So we have 39 plus 25. When we go ahead and add those together, we'll get 64. And now this problem that we've written right here looks just like the other problems that we did before. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take the square root of both sides. And we have x minus 5 either equals 8 or x minus 5 is equal to negative 8. And for whatever reason, my smartboard wants to get all funky in the afternoon here. So we're going to go ahead and we'll have x is equal to 13 or x is equal to negative 3. Okay? We're not going to fully get into number 6, but I do want to remind you, this problem is not in the correct form in order to complete the square. So if we had wanted to complete the square, we would need to move the 10 over here, and we would need to move 3x to the other side. So we would have 3x squared minus 15x equals 19, because we rearranged it. But we're still not in the correct form because we have a number in front of x squared that's not 1. So we have to divide everything by 3. So now we will complete the square with x squared minus 5x is equal to 6.3, or you could say 19/3. Now, this is not an ideal problem to complete the square in because of the decimals and all of the problems that we're going to encounter. So you may finish this if you like, but in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and move on to the quadratic formula. What? Well, that's interesting, Luke Bryan. I didn't know that. We do need to make a quick change here. This is 10.7. I'm sorry, this is 10.6 and 10.7. The only reason I care about what section it is in the book, in case you need to make a reference and check something there, you can go ahead and check this in the corresponding sections in your textbook. Okay, I know you all have the quadratic formula memorized, But I'll go ahead and write it just so you can have one more place to have it written down. Remember, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Remember, in order to use the quadratic formula, we have to set things equal to 0. Ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. And then typically we identify a, b, and c. If you remember the discriminant, that's just this part underneath the square root. That b squared minus 4ac, remember, is called the discriminant. And that tells us the number of solutions. And our other terms for solutions are zeros or intercepts, but we'll just focus on solution or zeros. And so the discriminant tells us how many solutions something's going to have. So if we have a positive discriminant, and I'm even going to use our fancy math, so if we say b squared minus 4ac is positive, meaning greater than 0, that means we're going to have 2 solutions. If b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, that means we're going to have 1 solution. And if we have a negative discriminant, smaller than 0, that means we're going to have no solution. Because remember, we're trying to then take a square root of a negative number, which of course we know not to do. All right, let's go ahead and try 1 with the quadratic formula, and then we can go ahead and move on. Okay, so we look at number 7 and we see that this is in the correct form. So we're going to go ahead and identify a, b, and c. A is 2. We don't see anything in front of b, so that's negative 1. And negative 15 will be c. All right, so we'll go ahead and now we're going to plug this in. So negative b, so positive 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay? Now we're going to go ahead and work through this problem. 1 plus or minus the square root. Negative 1 squared is 1. And this is where I had plenty of kids. We had lots of kids making sign errors. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times 15 is going to be 120. And it's a positive 120, and you need to make sure that you're careful about that. And all over 2 times 2, which is 4. Now I'll move Orbit up here. So we have 1 plus or minus the square root of 121 over 4. From this point, we're going to break it into our 2 separate solutions. The square root of 121 is 11, so we have 1 plus 11 over 4. 1 plus 11 is 12. 12 over 4 gives us 3. So that's one solution. In our other solution, 1 minus 11 over 4, that's negative 10 over 4. You can either reduce that to negative 5 halves, or you can say negative 2.5. Again, be careful that you look for, well, I got a decimal. Well, is the answer offered as a fraction? That's the one thing you need to remember about a multiple choice problem. All right. When we look at number 8, hopefully you're thinking, well, first I need to rearrange this. And what we're going to have you do is we want you to finish number 8, I guess for your homework assignment you would say. And then underneath there you've got lots of space on that piece of paper. So you make sure you go ahead and write any questions from chapter 10 that you might have. So make sure you go ahead and include those. And we will see you Monday.